This is Reformation3 TV, coming to you from the heart of London. Reformation3 is a global ministry founded and led by Dr. Brad and Pastor Iona Norman, whose mandate is to empower every believer to bring his kingdom to every place. Their passion is to see every local church operating in a fully functional fivefold ministry. Real people empowered to make real change. We trust that you'll be blessed by the ministry today. Please visit our website for more details, prayer requests, and some dynamic products that are available.
Matthew 13:24-13, it says this. Another parable he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while the man slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, an enemy has done this. The servant said to him, do you want us to then go and gather them up? But he said, no, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. When bad things happen to God people, I didn't so much come with a message title today, but I came with a declaration. And the declaration I came with today is that the promise will prevail. The promise will prevail. There was good seed sown in that ground. And the Lord reminded me as I was bringing my heart before him and he was speaking to me about Joseph. It says in the Message version in Genesis 37, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was a child of his old age. And he made him elaborately embroidered coat. And when his brothers realized that their fathers loved him more than them, they grew to hate him. They wouldn't even speak to him. Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said, listen to the dream I had while we were all out in the field gathering our bundles of wheat. All of a sudden, my bundle stood straight up, and your bundle circled around it and bowed down to mine. Joseph had some seed. He had some wheat he was waiting to grow. He had a dream that God had given him. He had a gift that God had given him. There was a plan on Joseph's life that he knew. It was their hatred that grew in them as the seed grew too. But you see, it was the seed. It was the seed, it was the gift that prompted the attack. It was the gift that prompted the hatred from his brothers. It was the jealousy around that. And I came to encourage someone today who's been asking God, why is that I keep finding myself facing opposition when all I'm trying to do is be faithful with what you've given me? And God is saying, it's the gift. It's the favor. It's my hand on your life. It's because there is a spotlight on that field and the devil doesn't know what I'm about to do, but he can see that there is a shadow. He can see that there is a cloud. He knows that something is coming. You would not be under attack if you were not such a threat. You are a threat to the gates of hell. And that is exactly why you have found yourself under attack. It was the good seed that attracted the attack. It's the good seed God placed in you that has got you to where you are. It's the good seed, everything he's placed within you that has attracted and prompted the jealousy, the hatred from those around you. It's good seed. It says, but while the man slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. The infiltration comes in the incubation. It's when you don't yet realize what God is going to do. When that dream is still hidden. When the calling is still hidden. When there's some rumblings, that ground has been shaken up a little bit. You can see that something's been deposited, but there's not yet really a clear sign of what is there, what's hidden. The infiltration comes. The seed comes. And this is what happened to Joseph. You see, a lot of us, I believe, find ourselves under attack when we see the wheat grow, when we see the tares appear. But it says that the attack comes in the incubation period. If you are incubating a dream or a vision right now, I want to tell you to be on your guard. It's in the incubation period. That's why King Herod came to kill Jesus and hatched a plan through deception while he was still a baby. And when he was unsuccessful, he killed all the babies under the age of 2. To try and get him in the incubation period. To try and get him before he even realized what it was he was up against. In the incubation period, before it's been birthed. While Joseph was sleeping, he was dreaming. But the enemy was scheming. Be on your guard while incubating your seed. But Joseph has another dream. And he goes and shares this dream, this time not just with his brothers, but also with his father. The dream begins to grow. The wheat begins to grow. The rumblings begin to start. More people are starting to find out about what God's going to do. He's starting to share this with more people. This is beginning to get some growth behind it, to get some momentum behind it. And although his father reprimands him at first because the dream takes him a bit by surprise, he starts to wonder and ponder on what this means. And he starts to dream with him. What is God going to do with this? As the dream grows, so does the attack. So his brothers hatch a plan to kill him. They take him and they leave him for dead. But see, Joseph doesn't die because you can't kill what God has called. You cannot kill what God has called. The Bible doesn't say that weapons won't be formed against you, but it says that they will not prosper. You will find the enemy comes and he tries to infiltrate and put some seed in your soil. But it didn't say that he came and uprooted those seeds. Those seeds were left there untouched. I came to tell you today that the devil cannot take out of you what God put in you. You might find yourself under fire. You might find yourself in some heat or some circumstances that you didn't expect. But although he can infiltrate and try and affect what's inside you, he has no access to take out what God deposited. You cannot kill what God has called. So Joseph finds himself instead alive, but sold into slavery. Put into Potiphar's house. See, when the devil can't kill you, he'll try and keep you enslaved. If I can't kill you by what I did to you, I'll try and keep you trapped in your past. I'll try and keep you bound by unforgiveness. I'll try and keep you in hatred and bitterness and disappointment. If I can't kill you, I'll keep you where you are. But Joseph didn't let what happened to him get inside him. He didn't let it affect that seed that God had placed within him. Even though they named him a slave, he was called to rule and reign. And he behaved like that too. He didn't act like a slave. He acted like a king, like a ruler. So what happens is he starts to attract more attention. It says in verse 26, when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. You see, the gift in his life became clear to everybody. He got favor with one of the most powerful men in the land. He was being promoted. He got attention. Everybody around him, even those who didn't believe in God or worship the same God as him, recognized that there was something supernatural on his life. The fruit began to bud. And it says here that when the fruit began to bud, the tares appeared also. I believe there are people here today suddenly recognizing the weeds in their life, the tares in their life. And you've been somewhat taken completely unaware. God, where did this come from? Why am I facing this now? Just when things were going well. Just when I started to see the fruit, just when it started to come together, just when people started to come on board, just when I got my finances back on track, just when I paid that little bit of debt off, just when it looked like my kids were going to come home, just when I started to see the fruit, what happened? The tares appeared also. So Joseph finds himself again under another attack, falsely accused and again placed in prison. You see, a weed is designed to strangle, to choke, and to hold bound. He found himself yet again in prison, facing slavery, imprisonment. I believe that there are people here today who've accepted a prison mentality. Don't let what you see make you forget what God said. Don't allow your circumstances to change what you believe in God. Don't become imprisoned by disappointment. You see, Joseph was in prison, but he was still dreaming. He was still dreaming. He was still exercising the gift that God had given him. Even though it looked like the dream was dead, he was still dreaming. What happened was he found himself around people who required his gift. You see, I believe that there's a key here. Joseph's dream looked dead. It looked impossible to him at this point in time. Yet he still watered somebody else's field. I believe so many of us wake up, find ourselves under attack, see the tares in the field with our fruit, and we become so panicked and rally around our own field that we don't water anybody else's. But God says it's not your job to weed, it's your job to water. I didn't call you to weed, I called you to water. Don't worry about what's happening here. I have that under control. So what Joseph did was he found somebody with a greater field than his, with a greater need than his, that required his gift, and he went and he watered that there. What do you believe in God for? What has God put in your heart, on your life? What is that he's placed inside of you? If it's a ministry and you're waiting for that to be birthed, I want to encourage you today. Find somebody with something greater and give them all that you have until God births yours. If you're believing God for a home, find somebody believing God who's closer to their dream or requires more than you, and sow into that and water their field. If you are believing for your children to come back to the Lord, find somebody else's children and invite them over for coffee. Sow and water in somebody else's field. Use your gift somewhere else. Because Joseph, in his home, in his field, with his family, with his brothers, even in Potiphar's house, had no access to the king. He needed the wheat and the tares. It was the prison that was the catalyst that got him to the palace. It says, the servants of the owner came and said to him, "Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares?" Don't you find there's always someone who comes along with that? I thought that you were doing good. I thought you raised your kids well. I'm sure my parents had many of those looks and statements and can testify to that. I thought you prayed and you fasted. I thought you heard from God. Hold on, you told me you had a dream and God had said he was going to do this, but now I'm looking at your situation and it looks nothing like that. So is it God who's failed or is it you? Which one is it? But instantly he said, this was an enemy. He didn't doubt God. If you've been looking at your tares, I want to tell you this morning, you did not forfeit or fail, nor did God forsake or forget. You don't have to own this one. You did not fail or forfeit your harvest, and God did not forsake you or forget. Do not let what you see change what you know God said. If he said it's good seed, if he said it's going to come to pass, if he said I'm going to do it, he will do it. Don't let what you see make you forget what God said. It then says, the servant said to him, "Do you want us to then go and gather them up?" But he said, "No, lest while you gather up the tares, you will also uproot the wheat with them." God is using the tares. He's using the weeds. If you only knew what God was doing, if you only knew what God was only able to do through the tares in your life. I want to tell you as I stand here this morning and can testify to you, honest before God Almighty, my enemies have done more for me to promote me to my plan and to God's plan and purpose for my life than any friend ever did. I'm grateful for the tares. Because every time I have come under attack, God has used the very thing the enemy has meant for harm, turned it to my good, and it has pushed me far further, far harder, and far faster towards the call of God in my life than any friend ever has. God needs the tares. He needs the attack. It was the tares, it was the prison, it was Potiphar's house that God used to get Joseph to where he knew he needed to be to fulfill the dream, to see the harvest come to pass in his life. If you only knew what God was doing with the weeds. David says in Psalm 23, you lead me in paths of righteousness, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You're leading me in paths of righteousness, creating a righteousness in me by taking me through the valley that I thought was going to kill me. What you thought was going to kill you, what you thought was going to wipe you out, what you thought was going to come and uproot everything that you've given your life to. God is saying, you have no idea what I am able to do in you, how I'm able to soften this ground, what I am watering and what I'm growing through the very thing that you wish was not here. Both are necessary to fulfill the dream. See, Judas grew with the other disciples. He was there with them too. But Jesus didn't uproot him and kick him out the club. No, he washed his feet. Because although he knew that the disciples would be the ones to continue his ministry, to continue to take what he had established on earth, to continue to build the kingdom, they weren't going to get him to the cross. It was Judas that got him to the cross. What about your salvation? It's not just the resurrection. It's not just the fruit. There would be no resurrection if there was no cross. It's the wheat and the tares. I'm believing that you are going to be a people today who are going to leave this place saying, I thank you, God, for everything you've put in my field. I thank you for the tares. I thank you for the attack. I thank you for the enemy. What they meant for harm, you are using for my good. Every time something comes up against me, there's another weapon being formed in my caddy. So Lord, I thank you. I praise you every time I find myself coming up against an opposition. I say you are creating in me something I did not have before. The wheat and the tares. It says in verse 30, let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. First gather the tares. The tares come first. But he doesn't say gather the tares and give them away or cast them out. He says your tares are going to be your fire. You see, I've planted in you the gift, but the weed is going to be the fire. You have no idea what this is going to burn inside you after you've come out the other end of it. You see, if I just gave you the gift, you would never know where to put it if you did not have the fire. You need the fruit and the fire. If I just gave you an ability to love, but you had never known heartbreak, you would never be able to love fearlessly because you'd always be afraid of being hurt. You need the fruit and the fire. If you had never faced that job loss, you would never have had to believe me to make ends meet and put food on the table. Now I can give you the promotion. Why? Because you've got the fruit and the fire. You've got the passion to pursue me and believe me. You know how to have faith for the small things, and now I know I can trust you with the big things. You need the wheat and the tares. It's the fruit and the fire. Everything you are facing right now is building and birthing within you a fire that's going to carry the gift and the seed that God deposited in you to places you never, ever imagined. The fruit and the fire. You see, Joseph actually says this. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. You see, once you face that fire, it no longer becomes about you. You're not just digging in your own field. He says, now that you've come up against me and I faced all these different things, what God was able to do was extend and enlarge my field so that I'm not in this just for me anymore, but I know that what God can do with this is far beyond even the dream that you hated to begin with. What you intended for harm, God is going to use. How does he do it? If you look at Exodus 23, verse 27 to 33, this is God speaking to another group of people about to enter their promise. And he says this to them: I will send my terror ahead of you and create panic among all the people whose lands you invade. I will make your enemies turn and run. I will send terror ahead of you to drive out the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites. But I will not drive them out in a single year, because the land would become desolate and the wild animals would multiply and threaten you. I will drive them out a little at a time until your population has increased enough to take possession of the land. How does he do it? Little by little. Little by little. Bundle by bundle. Group by group. Section by section. Area by area. Is there anybody in here today who started to see the hand of God move and uproot things out of their lives and got disappointed because it wasn't done all in once? It's bundle by bundle by bundle. You know why? If you look at the scripture, you'll see something that I find incredible. You see, while you're looking at the frustration of the territory that you want to occupy, what God is actually giving you is free labor. They're working for you. You haven't got to pay people to come in and plow your land because they're doing it for you. They have no idea. You have had no idea, but God has given you free labor. He says, I'm not even going to give you the hassle of having to prepare this ground for yourself. All you have to do is go and occupy because they are already working for you. They are plowing your field. You see, what they intended when they broke your heart was that you would be shattered. But what they actually did was soften it. They softened that ground and that soil. So now I can use in a way I couldn't do before. They are working for you. When that person left, when they abandoned you, they thought that you would be sitting there devastated and you may have had a month or two of crying. But God says what they actually did was working for you. It was free labor, because now that they're out the way, they took 5 others more with them. And now I can finally give you the land to possess. Have you even seen the workers in the field yet? Because they are working for you. It says here, for when you were enlarged and able to possess it, God has been growing you in this season. He said, I've been waiting for you to get on board. I've been waiting for you to grow. I've been waiting for your faith to expand. I've been waiting till you finally gave me the reins and gave me the control. I've been waiting for you to get to this point where you finally say, God, do what you got to do. And I trust you with the whole thing. It doesn't matter how bad my field looks, how messy it looks, how many weeds I see in there, how many times I've been in prison. Lord, I trust you with the field. If there's somebody in there and they look like my enemy, they're free labor. And I'm going to take it, God, because I trust you with my field. God says, I've been waiting for you to be enlarged, to give you the land. But although God says that I will give you the land, I'll give you the authority, he says you have to go and possess it. You have to go and take it. He said, I will go before you. He didn't say, I will go for you. When I think about the promises of God, and I couldn't help but sit and wonder about this as the Lord was speaking to me, I thought about Moses and the promised land, the promise he had been given. You see, Moses had been through so much with God, and he'd been faithful with so much. He was a man, he was imperfect, and he made mistakes, but he had seen God's hand move mightily. He had been used so greatly, and he had this promise, this dream that he was holding on to through so much. Yet he never saw the promised land. Why? It says in Exodus, in chapter 17, that God spoke to Moses and told him to strike the rock, and he did. Yet a few chapters later, God tells him to speak to the rock. And he strikes it instead, and I sat there with that, and I said, Lord, why was it such a difficult move to go from striking a rock to speaking to a rock? If he could do the one without hesitation, what was it that stopped him from doing the other? How is it that he was able to stand in the middle of that sea and pick up the staff and put it in the water with no hesitation, knowing that you would come through? But when you told him to simply open his mouth and speak, he didn't do it. If you look back at Exodus 4, it says this: Moses pleaded with the Lord, "Oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and I get my words tangled. You see, God was saying to him, Moses, I've been holding your hand. I've given you time. I've given you grace. I've been leading you, holding your hand through this one right up until this moment. When we first started this journey, you told me that you didn't like speaking, that you didn't feel good at it, that you were too insecure to say what I said, so I gave you the staff. And you took that staff with you and I showed up. I came through. But Moses, if after all of this, every attack, every battle, every tear, if after all of this you still can't let go, if you still can't let it go, if you still can't open your mouth and just trust me, if you're still going to try and take control. You see, Moses was still around a group of people who doubted him, who grumbled around him. There were still tears around him, but it wasn't producing in him what God needed it to. I believe that there are many of you in here today who have been through your seasons of battles. You've been through your attacks. You've found the weeds, the tears in your field. And you've become frustrated, saying, God, when am I going to get the breakthrough? When am I going to see the fruit? When are you going to weed these things out? When am I going to see the fulfillment of this? And God is saying, when you finally let go. When you finally let go of the pain. When you finally let go of the disappointment. When you finally let go of the people. You see, I came through and I delivered you from that relationship, yet you're still trying to create the same thing again. You're still repeating the cycle. When will you let go? God says, I can only give you your dream when you learn to let go and step out and trust me. I don't know if you know how a pearl is made, but a pearl is formed when there is something that gets into the shell of an oyster, and it's usually a parasite. And when the parasite comes and irritates the oyster, it forms a tear. And so the oyster has a muscle called a mantle, and it produces the coating of the oyster. And the mantle starts to come and cover the very thing that caused the pain. And over time, that oyster, that pain, the parasite begins to form a pearl. But what good is a pearl if the oyster stays closed? What good is a pearl if it doesn't let go? If the world doesn't see it, doesn't hear it, if you don't use it? What good is it if it stays hidden? What good is it if it's never seen? I believe that God today has said there's a mantle of my glory coming. There's a mantle of my restoration coming. There's a mantle of my healing coming. There's a mantle of my rain coming. Everything that you thought was dry, everything that you thought was barren, everything you thought was dead, everything you thought was lost, just when you thought that it could never be resurrected, God is saying, I'm coming with a mantle today of my glory, a mantle today of my healing, a mantle today of my restoration. He said, I'm even going to give you the eyes to see my handiwork behind the scenes, so you know how good I've been to you, so you know how faithful I've been, so that you can look back at what happened to you and you can see the free labor. You can see what I've been able to do. God is saying, if you will let go today, if you come to this altar and you'll say, God, I'm letting go. Once and for all, today I'm saying, Lord, take my field, take my seed, take the harvest. Lord, I give it all to you.
Thank you for joining us on Reformation3 TV. Tune in again next week for the latest sermons from Dr. Brad and Pastor Iona Norman.